Welcome to the Andrea Giovino Show. I want to thank all my subscribers for continuing to subscribe. I try to bring out, the best content for what you guys are asking for, and also leave comments. I try to get back to everybody. And I always want to thank Jesus for giving me this platform and being grateful for the life that I have today. And today we have back TobyTNT. And also my special guest, Tom Vecchia, a podcaster himself. And the reason I wanted to have Tom on is because I was interested in Tom's a legal businessman, but yet he knows so much about organized crime. Tom, the question for you is, I would like to know why and what is your interest in such a crazy genre?
Yeah.
And I know we know a lot of the same people.
Yes.
So give me a little bit of your background with the genre.
So first, thanks for having me, Andrea and Toby. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So
Pleasure.
give you a quick background. My family emigrated from Italy in 1959, moved to Elizabeth, New Jersey. Italian enclave. There's obviously a lot of organized crime that way, similar to probably a smaller Brooklyn, if you will, Brooklyn Light. And my mother actually kept us away from that life. My first cousin married Samuel Bull's niece. There's other people that married into other families in the life. But unless it was a wedding or a dinner dance or something, maybe a personal private event, for the most part, my mother always kept us away from that life. She was adamant about it.
Okay.
So with that being said, kept me away from the street, which made me be more interested in that life. Mm-hmm. So as I grew up, I became almost maniacally focused, read over 100 books, and just got really involved with kind of the history of the mob. And then when I was in my teens, I hung a lot in Brooklyn. That's why we know some of the same mutual people we know. So I got to kind of see the social aspect, never the business aspect, never did anything illegal, but saw a lot of the different people that are in the life that people talk about now. But then I kind of saw a little bit of access to both worlds and became somewhat fascinated with it.
Well, my question and my thought was that because we are friends now, and we do speak, and we do know the same people. Yeah. So I was wondering, do you get backlash for, because the people that we know are still out there, say, and do you get backlash from them because you have people on that have been cooperating witnesses? Yeah.
So I like to go right to it, Andrew. I appreciate it.
So basically, essentially, you're associating and you're speaking to rats on your podcast is what you're getting at the end of the day.
For the most part, correct. So essentially what happened was I started out as a regular podcaster. I'm a businessman, happened to be Italian American, like I mentioned. And then I just had some organized crime ex-guys on. I just noted it did really well versus what I would normally do, right? So then because of the personal interest, I started gearing towards that. Okay. Now, the truth of the matter is, and people may not want to hear this because some people don't like me for this reason, of my 500 some odd podcasts, only 15 of them had informants. Of my organized crime podcast, and I did have a podcast with an informant, but minus that, about maybe 10% of my podcast actually had informants on. But some people believe you can't be a little pregnant, and they have an oath, and they say, you know what, if you have one on, it's more than enough. Well, here is kind of my reason why I interviewed informants. Being a person who is very fascinated with that life, right, from an academic standpoint, knowing some of the people that they knew, right, I always liked the business aspect of things, right? When I interviewed Sammy the Bull, he was a number 2 man in a $500 million a year organization in the 80s.
Which was big.
Right?
Which was big.
Remember, there weren't spreadsheets, there weren't notebooks, there weren't, so if you know how to do business, you know how to do business. It's even harder to do business as a gangster. So my selfish interest when I interviewed Sammy and even Michael Francis and so forth was to extract the business end of things. So my show is not for everybody. I got backlash on both sides, meaning I do a lot with an Italian-American community. So a lot of people do not like that I interviewed anybody in that life, whether informant or non-informant. So I probably lost some opportunities and some friendships that way. And then in that life, yes, I did lose some friendships, but there are also some friendships that they're like, hey, just don't mention my name and I'm good.
And that's basically how I go by it. Like, I still have a lot of friends out there, but they ask me, Andrea, just don't mention my name. You can mention story, but don't mention my name.
That's correct.
And you know, because you and I have talked about those people.
Yes.
But I think that what I find for me, I'm someone that doesn't like to judge anybody.
Yes.
I don't want to judge. Who am I to be a judge and jury?
Yeah.
You know, always say I'm a practicing Catholic, and if God could forgive his children, then who am I to hold grudge? The problem I have is that when you're up against facing, say, a life sentence, you really don't know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
People don't know what they're going to do until they're in that position.
Correct.
And I think that my issue is when people are on and they glamorize or they talk about things that are very hurtful to families that have suffered the loss of someone. Yeah. That's where I have an issue with that. Yeah. And I think some of them, which being like with those types of men, I think a lot of them, I'd say 98% of them, they don't change.
Correct.
They can't change. Yeah. They're incorrigible. You know, they're narcissists or they're narcissistic sociopaths, or I'm not a doctor, I don't know. But I think even, let's take Sammy. Yeah. Sammy came out, he got the deal of the century, and then he got rearrested.
Yes.
You know, so now they have this whole little thing that they all go on each other's shows.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what thing you're talking about, the Whitsec Mafia, or because that's essentially what it is. They're all in the witness protection program. They all go on each other's shows, and there's basically the Mafia now outside of the Mafia. Yeah. Essentially, I believe it was John Gotti Jr. that came up with the reference to Whitsec Mafia.
But I think that if people are living their lives in a normal way and they're not hurting anybody and they're not doing anything illegal, then I give them credit for that. And if they're trying to make money this way and it's not hurting anybody, then that is okay.
But, and I want your opinion on this.
Please.
Some of these individuals, they are hurting people in a manner of they committed some extremely heinous, violent, deadly crimes. Yeah. And rather than keeping their mouth shut, which they were supposed to do originally, they're now all over YouTube talking and bragging about these heinous crimes. And, you know, they're monetizing from the murders, the drug deals, the stick-ups, the robberies, the tying people up, the innocent victims. And they're now talking and bragging about it on YouTube. That I have a problem with.
I want to ask Tom, because Tom is more of a historian and does his research, and, you know, that's why I wanted to have him on, is that when they take an oath. Yeah. Okay. So I come from an era of back in the day, the old timers, you know, Gotti and all them. So Gotti, to me, John Gotti, was your true stand-up mobster. Yeah. He was the man along with his crew. Yeah. Angelo Ruggiero, Johnny Caniglia, Mark Ryder, Anthony Rapino, Tony Roach, Bobby Borg. I could go on and on. I knew all those guys. Yeah. They take an oath. Correct. Here's my question to you, because this is what baffles me. And then, you know, when you're taking that oath, no matter what, whether there's a contract out on your life or whether somebody rats, whatever it is, you don't rat, because that's the whole basis of the oath. Yeah. Do you know what? Yeah. Okay. Well, and then you have these guys that come on and go, well, my wife said, and I'm going to say Michael Francis. Okay. I heard Michael Francis say, my wife said, don't go to that meeting because something's going to happen. Okay. So are you a mafia captain or are you listening to your wife? I have a problem with that. Yeah. Because the guys I know, and even including my own husband, my brothers, whoever, they don't listen to the wife. Yeah. You never listen to the wife. Yeah. So how are you running a crew if you're listening to her?
Yeah. Well, so there's a lot to unpack between what Toby and you said. So there's a lot.
Hold on one second. Yeah. Maybe his wife had a good feeling that day. Maybe they were going to kill him, and she had a bad feeling that day.
But that's the point I'm getting at.
Well, so this is where being kind of Italian American in New Jersey, whether you're a historian or whether you're around that, whether you're a street guy, non-street guy, I can just only speak for myself. Okay, so number one is you brought up being a Catholic, right? I'm also raised Catholic, and in Italy, when you are an informant, they actually call it a pentito or the repentant one. Mm-hmm. It's shrouded in Catholicism, and religion. On top of that, as a core Christian belief, even as Catholics, we judge people not where they begin, but where they end, right? So there is a little pushing and pulling on if somebody decides to change their life for the better, and unfortunately they inform other people to do it. I don't besmirch somebody for trying to change their life. Now, in terms of informants, I've been fairly consistent. I personally do not agree with somebody who's an informant personally. Me personally, I would never put myself in that position. Like, well, if you were facing 100 years, I'm not stupid enough to put myself in that position.
Right.
But one thing I can say is I do believe in law and order. And I do believe that there is a spectrum of informants, right? I interviewed about 10 of them. Billy Catolo had killed his father. You go against somebody kills your father who you idolized, and now you want to get revenge on those same people. My personal opinion.
Okay, but then here's another thing.
Yeah.
They dance around why they cooperated. Just say I cooperated, like I say. I didn't have to cooperate. My
Correct.
brother and my husband did.
Yeah.
But if I had to, I would have.
Yeah. Well, you're honest about it.
I'm honest.
Yeah.
Michael says
Yeah.
always, but I didn't put anybody in jail. But if you took that oath, you know with that oath, you never, ever cooperate.
Well, so what are we
Martha.
what are we looking for, right? We're looking for the truth, right?
We're looking for the truth.
Well, hold on, Andrea. And I'm old enough, and I think Toby's old enough, he's a young guy, that I was taught there's 3 versions of the truth. There's your personal truth where you believe to be true, kind of the community belief, right? That believes that whether it be Republicans or the Mafia, that general crowd think, right? And then there's the objective truth, like, well, that is red, right? So there's three different kinds of truths. Part of the challenge is the truth is, in that sense, kind of fluid. So in Michael and his belief, and I'm not sticking up for Michael, is he may believe that he took an oath for omerta, and with that did not roll on any made men, because I don't think he took an oath for Norby Walters, right? Because that's allegedly who he ratted on. So that's like him. Michael DiLeonardo holds no qualms, no excuses. This is why I did it, and he was honest about it.
And I love Michael.
And I do believe there's a spectrum. But going back to law and order is we can't cherry pick, meaning what if there was an MS-13 informant that saved a fentanyl shipment coming to the U.S.? What if there was I don't want to say a P ring or, you know I'm talking about, a pet ring.
Yes.
I don't want to say because I don't get demonetized. And there's a ring and there's an informant on that, right? So for me, if somebody's going to get hurt, I'm not going to glorize an Italian-American informant and say, well, that's wrong, but a terrorist informant is okay. It can't be a little pregnant on that front. So I've been pretty consistent. The other part is, like I said, I look for the business aspect of things. And I also try to keep an open forum. So I've had people come on. So I had like John Aled on pretty early. And I had a gentleman named Chris. He came on to combat it. I had a viewer call in for 2.5 hours to state facts against it. So if I have a show and I have somebody on that you are opposed to, if you are a credible counterbalance, I will have that person on. They don't have to be famous. They don't have to be they'd be credible, but they don't have to be famous. They don't have to be notable. They could hide their face. They could hide their voice. And I have that a few times. So what I try to do is I do try to get to the truth. I look for the business end. But if there's a family member that's hurt or somebody that wants to oppose them, I do my best to have an open forum so anybody can speak freely on my channel.
I like that. And I think that also from the way the street life is today, and then going back to how I grew up around the people I grew up, those guys, it's totally different. It's a completely different, I feel there is no structure or mob anymore, because today, if they do go out and do something, whether it be a heist or beat somebody up or whatever, they're going to rat.
Yeah.
Well, they're facing the RICO law, essentially. Almost every time they're going to be facing the RICO law.
Right.
And when you're facing the RICO law, you're guilty
numbers.
by association of a whole book of crimes, essentially, and you're going to jail for a very long time just by
That's what
guilt
happened
of association.
to me. I was hit with a RICO.
Oh, wow.
And that's what my charges were, RICO with 22 men.
Yikes.
And I was facing the minimum. They offered me 10 years. And that's when I had said to my husband, was incarcerated at the time, which never wanted to cooperate.
Yeah.
And that's how I got off the case. I was released from the case. But I love when people say, she cooperated, there's papers. Would you please put the papers? Because there was nothing, I never did any. I never had to.
So here's, I think, a different view on cooperating. Cooperating is the byproduct of something bigger that's wrong. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. You're like, well, the street life is different. The street guys are different. They're different now. And the reason being is if you kind of sit in the same area we're in now in 1985, these guys control the city. They control hundreds of million. They control garbage.
Oh, my God.
Drywall.
Yes.
You couldn't pour an ounce of cement.
Fashion. Everything.
Garment industry. And the truth of the matter is, whether it's an illegal organization or not, it has to go with the times. It has to pivot. It has to move along with the times. And it has to kind of be like, again, fluid to morph to current times. The mob just didn't do it, right? Mm-hmm. And they brought the wrong people in because think about it, right? You're a nice guy. I'm a nice guy. We can do different things. I have a business. I'm not sure what you do. Probably you're successful in whatever you do. You don't. Why go in the street life now, right? You're gonna upset your mom. You're gonna be a dirtbag. You're gonna be getting the drugs, whatever it is. Right?
Here's the thing, and I'm gonna touch on what you said earlier. So basically, why go into the street life?
Correct.
Some of these guys are brought into it. Their parents were.
That's
in it.
correct.
So you mentioned a couple of guys earlier, Michael Francis, Anthony Reggiano. Their fathers were in it. They were groomed into it. A lot of these guys were
they don't know any better.
They were raised into it.
Yeah.
The same way, basically all three of us essentially at this table are sitting here, and we grew up in and around people in the mafia.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. That's what we were brought up around. Certain people were much more groomed into it, and the circumstances were much different, so that's what they became. Other people, like myself, I got to see from a very young age the destruction, the ruination of families. Yeah. My father was in prison. My stepdad was in prison.
Your godfather, I don't know if you know.
My godfather was killed.
Jimmy DiBartola. That was his godfather. He was my best man at my wedding. He was very close with Eddie Leno. Yeah. And that's Toby's godfather. Toby's father was also around all these people, very close with the people that we know.
Yeah. But I want to interject in a second. So, and I'll just give you the business end of things because it's what I do in my legit life. 90% of businesses that a father hands down to a son or a daughter, so whatever, construction, whatever it is, 90% of them go belly up. There's a reason for that.
And what?
Just because I grew up with my father and I did construction with them, didn't mean I want to. I maybe want to be an artist. I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to do something else. I wanted to go into corporate, whatever it was, right? So it's like, you got to do this because your father did it, right? Mm-hmm. And the mob is no different, right? You're like Reggiano and even Francis, so there's people. So they might not have a choice because that was like kind of the business they were in. So it's kind of has a similar result. Oh, I didn't really want to be a mafioso. I grew up in it. Then later on, you're in adulthood. You're like, this is not for me. So as an organization, and I get a lot of crap for this, but as an organization, in my opinion, it should have morphed over to more of a Freemasonry, right? Maybe 80% legit. You live off your reputation. You maybe have a group of guys or a crew that does the dirty work, right? You give them a salary or stipend, so they're happy and they'll thug it out. And when they're ready, you activate them kind of like a current murder inc. So you have that influence of like something happens to you, and then you're 80% legit. And then when you do get caught, like the West Side Genovese family, it's usually financial crimes. It's for big money and it's for low sentences. So the Genovese family is the blueprint the other four families should have followed.
I like this, that back in the day, they would have made you consigliere.
Not the tough guy, that's for sure. Not the tough guy.
You're the advisor to the family.
No, I get a lot of crap for it. They're like, what is this, the mob, Kodak or Xerox? Well, yeah, in a way, it's a multi-million-dollar company, $100 million company. Any organization has to evolve, and it just didn't evolve here in the U.S. So what I'm fascinated with in my studies and my podcast is Canada is another Italian organization, but actually grew. Okay. In Italy, so the 'Ndrangheta, which is a Calabrian mob, used to be kind of like a group of bandits, right? And the way they made money was kidnapping. So if you were in the 80s in Italy, there was actually in the Corriere della Sera, which is the big newspaper, there was an area in the section called sequester season.
But even in Italy,
all the kidnappings.
Even in Italy, they went as far as killing Judge.
Well, that was the Sicilian Mafia, which I'll get to in a second. So the Calabrian Mafia made their money by kidnapping people, where they actually would have a kidnapping section in the nightly newspaper. So then they took that money and did one thing with it, and one thing only: just bought coke. While the Sicilian Mafia was doing heroin, buying heroin, they just dealt with coke for just two reasons. Number one, it was less expensive at the time in Italy. They kind of cornered the market. And number two, respectfully, coke people who do coke generally don't die.
Right. And
they have money. Whereas heroin, they tend to die, and they tend to be lower in the economic social scale. So they basically cornered the coke trade, and now they're worth probably $50 billion a year in turnover. Versus the U.S. Cosa Nostra and Mafia is by the wayside. So it's not just about like the culture, or not just about, informants. And also the Calabrian mob, literally, I believe, in the existence since the 1700s, there's less than 50 informants ever, and I think it's probably under 10. The reason being is if you or me are brothers, we marry two sisters, they marry a brother, they actually marry each other.
Yes, they keep it in the family.
So when you inform, think about this, right?
Yes.
So if you inform, you're not informing on the kid you grew up with down the street,
informing
Johnny
on
Douglas.
your family.
You're informing on your brother-in-law,
right?
Who your godson is going to lose his father. You're informing on your own brother. You're informing on your father, on your first cousin, on your gambada. So there's less informants because of that. So because you're having less informants, and they had a strict strategy of let's just buy coke. They didn't dabble in heroin. They didn't dabble in methamphetamines, fentanyl. Well, they are a little bit now. But so the Italian mob in Canada and the Calabrians grew widely. Where you wanted blowing up the judges, I actually interviewed Salvarina, the son of Totorina. They made the mistake by taking the government head on. They blew up the two most important judges at the time. The Calabrian mob didn't do that. The Calabrian mob, that's why they were strong. And they also picked up the vacuum of power from the Sicilian Cosa Nostra as well.
To touch on what you said earlier, in terms of a business standpoint, a legitimate businessman wants to grow a business. They want to take individuals that are willing to put work in.
That's right.
And utilize those individuals. I know because I own my own company. Yeah. Utilize those individuals to help grow that business. The problem that you run into with the Mafia, it's no different than if you see American Greed.
Yes.
And you watch these scam artists, the guys are already, the financial fraud, they're already making millions of dollars, but they get caught up. They get greedy. They want to make hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yep.
And the same goes with the Mafia. Like, they have the legitimate businesses, but the drugs becomes very profitable. The extortion, the contracts in construction. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And it's the greed that ends up catching them. And that's basically, because essentially you could take all of these people and be 100% legit businesses.
Well, look at ChGante, who not far from here, and Genovese, and you couldn't get in front of him, you couldn't talk to him. He was a ghost, essentially, right? As far as if you were in that life. But yet he let a guy named Pete Savino, who's an associate, have a direct line to him because he was bringing in a boatload of money. What I've noticed in my kind of research and guests and discussions is whenever they kind of go out of organization and whenever greed is involved.
It's greed. It's greed.
It's always greed.
That's when it crumbles.
But we're going to close out. I'd love to have you back.
I'd love to be back.
Because I have a lot more questions for you. Do you have anything else you want to ask?
No.
Tom?
We had a good episode today, Tom. It was nice having you.
I love it.
Tom's, anything you want to say to the audience?
I just want to say check out the podcast, New Theory Podcast, and happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, TobyTNT. He's on Instagram. Follow Tom, New Theory Podcast. He's also on Instagram. Thank you to my audience. Continue to subscribe. Thank you, Jesus, for giving me this platform and having these wonderful guys here. Thank you.
God bless.
Ciao. That was good.
Nice work.